When we talk about manifestation, we often focus on staying positive, visualizing, or keeping our vibration high. But what about when life stirs up the opposite? Anger, outrage, frustration. What happens when emotions feel so strong that they hijack our focus and pull us away from the reality we want to create? Here's the thing, outrage isn't the enemy. In fact, outrage can be powerful. It's a signal that something matters deeply to us. It carries energy, intensity, and passion. But if we don't know how to work with it, it can trap us in cycles of negativity. Repeating the same conversations in echo chambers, venting instead of moving forward, and ultimately distracting us from the life we're trying to manifest. That's the paradox. The same emotional energy that could propel us toward change often ends up keeping us stuck. Outrage becomes noise instead of fuel. In this video, I want to unpack how emotions, especially the heavy ones like anger and outrage, can either limit us or empower us. We'll talk about how limiting thought patterns creep in when we're consumed by emotion, and why that matters for manifestation. And most importantly, we'll explore practical ways to transform that raw energy into something aligned, productive, and creative, something that serves the higher good rather than draining us. Every emotion we experience is energy in motion. Think about that phrase for a moment, energy in motion. It's not passive, it's not neutral. It moves us. It shifts our physiology. And it influences the way we see the world around us. Now let's take outrage as an example. Outrage is one of the most intense emotions we can feel. When we're outraged, our body reacts instantly. The nervous system activates the fight or flight response. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood the body. Our heart rate goes up. Our breathing changes, and the brain narrows its focus onto the perceived threat. Psychologically, this is incredibly important. In those moments, the brain is not designed for deep reflection or problem solving. It's designed for survival. We become hyper-focused on what's wrong, on who to blame, on what we need to resist. That's why when we're outraged, our thoughts tend to loop. We replay the injustice, the insult, or the event over and over in our mind. It's our brain's way of keeping us locked onto the perceived danger. This is where manifestation gets tricky. The law of attraction teaches that what we focus on expands. But in a heightened emotional state, especially one of outrage, our focus is often glued to the problem. We're not thinking about solutions, visions, or higher outcomes, we're reinforcing the vibration of resistance. Think of it this way, outrage is like rocket fuel. It's powerful, it's fiery, and it can take us places. But if the rocket is pointed downward or sideways, all that fuel doesn't take us into orbit, it just burns up or even crashes us harder into the ground. Without direction, that energy doesn't build the future we want. On a psychological level, unchanneled outrage also creates what's called cognitive tunneling. This is when our awareness becomes so narrowed that we can't see alternative perspectives or creative possibilities. It's why people in echo chambers often feel stuck. They're repeating the same patterns, reinforcing the same frustrations, and not accessing the bigger picture. Another effect is what psychologists call confirmation bias. When we're angry, we unconsciously start searching for evidence that validates our anger. We see more and more of what's wrong and less of what's right. This not only keeps us in a cycle of negativity, it also distances us from gratitude and openness, two of the most important states for manifestation. Here's the paradox: outrage feels active, but psychologically it often keeps us passive. It tricks us into thinking we're doing something by venting, arguing, or consuming more content that fuels our anger. But in reality, we're just recycling the same energy without moving it into creation. So what's the alternative? Outrage doesn't have to be suppressed. In fact, suppressing it only makes it come out in destructive ways. The alternative is to pause and redirect. To ask ourselves, what value is this outrage pointing me toward? What's the deeper truth underneath this energy? Often, anger points to love. Outrage at injustice points to a deep value for fairness. Frustration with corruption points to a longing for integrity. These underlying values are the compass that can reorient our energy. When we learn to listen to outrage not as a final destination but as a messenger, we reclaim its power. We transform it from noise into clarity, from survival mode into creative momentum. This is how emotion, instead of being a distraction from manifestation, becomes one of the greatest catalysts for it. When emotions run high, especially emotions like outrage or frustration, the way we think begins to shift. It's almost like our mental lens zooms in on only one part of the picture, the problem, the offense, the obstacle. Psychologists call this cognitive narrowing. Our attention is pulled so tightly into the source of the emotion that we lose sight of the broader landscape. This is what I call limiting thinking. It's not just about having negative thoughts, it's about having thoughts that shrink our possibilities. When we're caught in limiting thinking, we start telling ourselves stories like, nothing will ever change. They'll always be this way. The system is broken and there's nothing I can do. These thoughts may feel true in the moment, because they match the emotion we're feeling. But they're not ultimate truth. They're products of a brain that's been hijacked by survival mode. Limiting thinking makes the world feel smaller, darker, and less open. And here's where manifestation gets blocked. Manifestation is about aligning with possibility, with openness, with potential. If our mind is closed, if our focus is locked onto what we don't want, we literally can't hold the vision of what we do want long enough for it to grow. The vibration we're sending out is one of contraction rather than expansion. Now let's contrast that with expansive thinking. Expansive thinking happens when we step back from the narrow tunnel of emotion and look at the bigger picture. It's when we ask ourselves, what else could be possible here? What is this outrage showing me about what I care most deeply about? If I could redirect this energy, what would I want to create with it? Psychologically, expansive thinking activates different parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for problem solving, creativity, and long-term planning. Instead of running in circles inside the limbic system of fight or flight, we're using higher-order thinking. This shift doesn't erase the emotion, it integrates it. It allows the raw power of outrage to become a compass, pointing us toward a vision rather than keeping us locked in resistance. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who's outraged about environmental destruction. If they stay in limiting thinking, they might cycle in thoughts like, the planet is doomed, corporations don't care, politicians are corrupt. This creates despair and paralysis. But if they step into expansive thinking, the same outrage can fuel actions like, I'm going to support local sustainability projects. I'm going to educate others. I'm going to imagine and manifest a world where balance with nature is possible. The energy is the same, but the direction has changed. Expansive thinking doesn't mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is fine. It means refusing to let your mind stop at the obstacle. It's the practice of saying, yes, this is hard, yes, this is painful, and also, something greater is possible here. When we move from limiting to expansive thinking, we align with the essence of manifestation. We're no longer feeding energy into what we don't want, we're consciously choosing to feed it into what we do. And because energy follows focus, the universe begins to respond in kind. So here's the takeaway: emotions like outrage are not roadblocks to manifestation unless we let them lock us into limiting thought. The moment we open the door to expansive thought, the emotion transforms. It becomes guidance, momentum, and fuel for creation. We've talked about how outrage holds energy, and how it can trap us in limiting thought if we're not careful. Now let's talk about how to work with it. Because here's the truth, you don't have to suppress your outrage, and you don't have to drown in it either. There's a middle path, one where you transform it into power, clarity, and aligned action. I want to share 4 simple but powerful steps that you can practice the next time you feel overwhelmed by outrage or frustration. Step 1. Pause and name it. The first thing to do is just stop and notice what's happening. Outrage tends to hijack us. Our body tenses, our mind races, and before we even realize it, we're already venting or spiraling. So pause. Take a deep breath and simply name it. I'm outraged. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. When you name an emotion, you create space between you and the feeling. That space is the beginning of choice. Step 2. Ask what it's pointing to. Every strong emotion has a message. Outrage usually says, "This matters to me. Something here feels deeply out of alignment with my values." So ask, what value is being violated here? What deeper truth is my emotion pointing me toward? For example, anger at dishonesty points to a love for integrity. Frustration at inequality points to a longing for justice. By naming the value beneath the emotion, you shift from focusing on what you don't want to clarifying what you do want. Step 3. Redirect the energy. This is where the magic happens. Outrage is raw energy, and energy needs direction. Once you know the value underneath, channel the energy into something constructive. That might mean creative expression, like journaling, painting, or making music. It might mean physical movement, like a workout or a long walk, to transmute the intensity. Or it might mean constructive action, like starting a conversation, joining a cause, or setting a new boundary in your life. The key is to move the energy out of the echo chamber of thought and into some form of aligned expression. Step 4. Connect to the bigger vision. Outrage without vision creates noise. Outrage with vision creates change. Ask yourself, if I could redirect this energy toward a higher good, what would that look like? What's the outcome I want to manifest? Instead of just resisting what you don't want, imagine what you do want, and then feed your energy there. This could be as personal as creating more peace in your relationships, or as collective as contributing to a movement for justice or healing. Here's why this works: emotions are energy, but manifestation requires direction. By pausing, identifying the value beneath the emotion, redirecting that energy, and connecting to a bigger vision, you transform outrage from a distraction into fuel. It no longer keeps you small, circling the problem. It lifts you, expands you, and aligns you with the higher reality you want to call in. So the next time you feel yourself getting pulled into outrage, remember, it's not about suppressing the feeling or shaming yourself for it. It's about transmuting it. Anger can be a signal, outrage can be a compass, and frustration can be a spark, if we know how to use them. So let's bring this all together. We've explored how outrage and heavy emotions aren't just obstacles, they're energy. They're signals. They're raw fuel. But whether that fuel keeps us stuck or moves us forward depends on how we use it. When we stay in limiting thinking, outrage traps us in cycles of resistance. It narrows our perspective, it pulls us into echo chambers, and it keeps us focused on what we don't want. And in that state, manifestation feels impossible, because the universe is only receiving energy that reinforces lack, anger, or despair. But when we shift into expansive thinking, everything changes. Outrage becomes a messenger pointing us back to our deepest values. It reminds us of what matters most. And when we channel that energy into creative expression, constructive action, or a higher vision, we align ourselves with the very reality we want to manifest. So here's my invitation to you: the next time you feel outrage rising, don't push it away, and don't let it consume you either. Pause. Name it. Ask what value it's pointing to. Redirect that energy. And then connect with the bigger vision of what you truly want to see in your life, and in the world. Because the truth is, every emotion can serve your manifestation journey if you choose to work with it consciously. Anger can become clarity. Frustration can become momentum. Outrage can become the spark that ignites real change. And that's the higher good we're all capable of creating. If this message resonated with you, I'd love for you to share your own experiences in the comments. How have you dealt with outrage in your life? What values do you think your emotions are pointing you toward right now? And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because we're going to keep exploring how to transform the inner self to shape the world around you.